Madhu, you're the host now.
Yeah, Sudarshan, yeah.
Okay, fine.
Okay, let's get started. Okay, Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Yo antaha pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjeevayati akila shakti daraswadamnam anyamscha hastacharana shravanatvagaadin pranan namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam lasatu shrimadananda tirtendurno hridambare yadvachaschandrika swanta santapam vinikrantati padavakya pramanajnan pranamya shirasa gurun vyakarishe yata bhutam vishnu tattva vinirnayam. So good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm sure folks are going to join us as the class proceeds. But what I thought we will do is we'll just get started because there's quite a lot of stuff to cover today. So before we start the class, I was going to invite Sudarshan to make a very important and an exciting announcement on behalf of Stoke Academic Hindu Society. So Sudarshan, do you want to come in?
Yeah. Thank you, Madhu. What it is, we just bought a center, like a community center in Stoke-on-Trent, which we can use it for any activities. It's basically like, bought under the ISKCON, like a ISKCON community center, and it will become an ISKCON temple in future. But until then, until even after that, maybe we can use it for all community activities. And so that is something which just completed 3 days ago, and we had an open day today. So we could even have an Upanishad open day there, like Upanishad retreat and everything there. So I just...
Sudarshan, you went muted there. So anyway, I think Sudarshan has got some IT issues.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know which part I went mute. Sorry, I mean, it just basically we bought a community center in Stoke-on-Trent, which we can use for any activities for our Upanishad retreat or any other meetings. So I just wanted to inform you about that. Thank you very much, Madhu. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you.
So that's really exciting news, Sudarshan. Thank you very much for the update. I know it's right hot off the press. With a new community center and an ISKCON center in Stoke-on-Trent, so it feels like it's a good forum for us to meet there in person. Anyway, so let's move on to the class proper. Okay, so What did we do 2 weeks ago? So we actually covered quite a lot of ground 2 weeks ago. Today is the 12th session, as you know. We've been doing Katha Upanishad for the past 5 months. So that gives you an idea as how profound and how deep Katha Upanishad is. And one really cannot skim the surface and pretend that one has understood the essence of the Upanishads, particularly Katha Upanishad. Yeah, so we need to actually invest a lot of time and effort in actually understanding the language of the Upanishads and actually to understand what is the philosophy that is being conveyed here. So 2 weeks ago, we covered about 5 verses. So as you know, the first vara was about him going back to earth and serving his father and his father recognizing him and his father becoming a nice chap. The second vara is about Nachiketa learning about the Agni sacrifice and as to how by knowing the Agni sacrifice, one can reach the eternal heavens or the moksha sthiti. And the third question that we are dealing with at this point here is, who is this Brahman? What is his greatness? What is the relationship between Brahman and Jiva? What is the state of that relationship between Brahman and Jiva in samsara? What is the relationship between Brahman and Jiva in moksha sthiti? So these are all the questions that our friend Nachiketa wants to know. And at that point, and we have covered a lot of sessions talking about, that interaction that goes on between Yama and Nachiketa and how Yama deflects this question. He deflects this in from various angles. First, he wants to test whether Nachiketa is really worthy of having this higher knowledge or not, and he entices him with various material temptations. And Nachiketa bounces it back and he demonstrates that he is actually not interested in temporary material things, and what really fascinates him is the higher philosophy of the Upanishads. The higher knowledge is what that he is after. So Yama is kind of impressed with him. And then the next tact that Yama takes is, let's praise this guy and see whether he's going to get egoistic. And he does all sorts of tactics. And in all the verses that we have seen before, he praises Nachiketa, saying that what a wonderful boy is he, what an elevated chap is he, what a detached person he is, and how he is very knowledgeable. And what is it that Yama, I have to teach you? You know so many things already, and so on and so forth. But our friend Nachiketa doesn't fall trapped to that kind of enticement. He never gets egoistic. So that's what we have done. And so now Yama is actually convinced that Nachiketa is actually an adhikari, that he's actually a mumukshu, and he's actually enthusiastic to know about the higher philosophies of the Vedas, and he wants to know about the supreme Brahman. So Yama is kind of getting convinced, and then he starts off with the philosophy proper of the Katha Upanishad, and that is what we are going to be doing from now on. Actually focus on this entity called Brahman and how Yama glorifies and talks about this Brahman. Okay, so before we do that, just wanted to pick up on a couple of words from previous mantras. So we saw this word, etat shrutva samparigrihya martyaha. So I just want to remind you all of this particular verse called samparigrihya. So what does samparigrihya mean? Grihya means to know. Parigrihya means to know all aspects and from all different viewpoints. And samparigrihya means after knowing various viewpoints, one does his own shravana, manana, and dhyana and comes to a firm establishment of truth. So that is samparigrihya, and that is what we should do in our journey towards knowing the infinite. Is we understand what are all the various philosophies out there, what are the various religious views on this, what are the various philosophical views on this, and then do our own logical analysis and then come up to a conclusion. So that is the key word, the samparigrihya. Okay, so that I wanted to remind you of what that means. And then, of course, when our friend, our teacher Yama, when he praised Nachiketa so much, Nachiketa was actually feeling a little bit embarrassed, and he said, "Why is Yama praising me so much?" And he said, "Look, I don't want all the things that you've said. Yetat tat pashyati tadvada. Yama, don't beat around the bush. Get to the point. Tell me about that. I want to know, please. Don't distract me. This is what I want to know. And what is it that I want to know? Anyatra dharmat, anyatra adharmat, anyatra asmat, kruta akrutat, anyatra bhutacha bhavyacha, yattat pashyasi tadvada." So go back to the previous class and and think about what this mantra actually means. So when Nachiketa says yettat pashyasi tadvada, Yama is really, he is elated. He's elated and he's so impressed with this student who is a true adhikari or a mumukshu who wants to know about higher philosophy. And I have reminded all of us in this forum on a number of occasions. So that is the kind of position that we need to be if we really need to get the knowledge. Yeah, we need to become a Nachiketa. Okay. So what did our teacher Yama started off with? So this is the mantra or the verse that I want to spend for the rest of today's talk, because this is one of the most important mantras of Katha Upanishad, dare I say, the entire Vedantic philosophy. Okay. This verse summarizes what is this Vedic philosophy is all about. And you know what? When Yama is so impressed with Nachiketa, he wants to start off his teaching with the most impressive exposition of the Vedic philosophy and also the summary of the Vedic philosophy. So that is what Yama wants to do right from the start. And he says, Sarve Vedaha Yat Padam Amananti Tapamsi Sarvani Cha Yad Vadanti Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Om Ityetad. Okay. So this is the first real Vedic philosophy mantra of Yama, and I would strongly urge you to memorize this mantra and think about it every day of your life. Sarve Vedaha Yat Padam Amananti Tapamsi Sarvani Cha Yad Vadanti Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Om Ityetad. So what does this mean? So let us break this open, because this verse is so important. I think we have to split it open, look at the etymological sense of it to actually understand what is the philosophy behind this particular mantra. So let us look at the first block, Sarve Vedaha. Okay, so he says, yes, Nachiketa, you want to know about the Supreme Brahman. You want me to teach you about the Supreme Brahman, his greatness, and his state in samsara, his state in moksha. What is his niyamakatva and all that? You want me to teach a lot of things about Brahman, right? So this is the fundamental truth. Sarve Vedaha Yat Padamamananti. Okay, so all of the Vedas only talk about this Brahman. There is nothing else that the Vedas actually talk about. Every sound, every letter, every word, every sentence, every paragraph, every adhyaya, every portion of the Vedas, the entire Vedas, the infinite Vedas, they all talk about the Supreme Brahman alone. So that is the first conclusion, or, that is the first statement of Yama. And that is something that we need to take very, very seriously. When Yama says, Sarve Vedaha Yat Padamamananti, there is great truth in it. And let us see what that great truth is. So I want to open up today for all of us to think about. And I've just put a question, and we are all very familiar with it. And what is Veda? Okay, so that is the first question, and we have done it on a number of occasions. So please feel free to contribute here. So what is our understanding of what Veda actually means? So I'm going to leave it open for discussion for the next minute or two.
Vedas are Apaurushaya, and it talks about, it is the way to see the Lord, to know about the Lord, to know about Brahman.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Anybody else? I think somebody else wanted to come in. Okay, thank you. So let's think about this. What does this Veda actually means? Veda means, we all know, it comes from the root word Ved, means to know. To know what? To know about buffaloes and donkeys and cars, or to know about something bigger. Yeah. So Veda essentially means that body of scriptures that give us access to the knowledge about Brahman. Okay, so that is what Pippalada Shruti said, isn't it? Let's revise these verses. Na indriyani, na anumanam, vedahyeva enam vedayanti, tasmad ahuhu vedaha. That Brahman entity cannot be known through your sense objects. It cannot be known through dry empirical logic. that body of scriptures that gives us the knowledge of Brahman is called the Vedas. Taittiriya Brahmanam says the other way of it. Na avedavin manutetam bruhantam sarva anubhom atmanam samparaye. Which means he who does not know the Vedas has no chance of knowing the Supreme Brahman, and he has no chance of attaining liberation. Okay. Now, as Pratibhaji mentioned, of course, Vedas are apaurushaya. So, apaurushayatvat Vedasya, and it is an entirely a very unique set of authoritative texts that the practitioners of Sanatana Dharma use it to understand the Supreme Brahman. So, Brahma Sutra, for example, defines this Vedas as na vilakshanatvad asya tatatvam cha shabdat. Tatatvam cha shabdat. Navilakshanatvadasya tatatvam cha shabdat. Shabdat means Vedas. Navilakshanatva means it is of an entirely different category. What is that entirely different category? It is apaurushaya. And because of apaurushaya, it is supremely authoritative. So that is the first idea that we get when Yama uses Sarve Vedaha Yat Padam Amananti. So I've got our famous chapter 15, 15th verse, which also picks up a similar idea. So who is going to recite the 15:15, please? Sushrut or Neeta, do you want to go there?
Yeah, okay. Vedaishcha sarvairahameva vedyo vedanta krit veda videvachaham.
Beautiful. So that is also a very important verse of chapter 15:15. When you look at the first line, Vedaishta sarvair ahameva vedyaha. It is the same. Sarve vedaha yat padam amananti is what Yama is selling in the third. He is in the third person stuff. He's saying, look, everything is talking. Veda talk about him only. Whereas in the first person, Krishna says, Vedaishta sarvair ahameva vedya. The whole of the Vedas only talk about me. So, and again, as we have discussed on a million occasions, whenever we study Katha Upanishad, we should always look for verses in Gita and see whether, because as they know, they're both linked up with each other. So when you have this Vedic text, when there is such a big volume of text, we know, of course, there are some folks who think that some portions of the Veda is Karma Kanda, some portion of the Vedas is Devi Kanda, Devata Kanda, and some portion of the Vedas is the Upanishad Kanda or the real knowledge. Okay, so this is it is a very artificial definition, because if you look at Mundaka Upanishad or Atharvana Upanishad, that again gives us a good definition of how we need to approach this problem. And it says, Dve vidye veditavye itihasma yat brahma vido vadanti paracha aparacha. Tatra apara rigvedo yajurvedaha samavedo atharvavedaha siksha kalpo vyakaranam niruktam chando jyotishamiti atapara yeya tad aksharam adigamyate. So the same Vedas, it is only how we approach it. The Vedas are the Vedas. They don't change. Their fundamental interpretation is the same. It is only how we approach the Vedas that makes it appear to be a Paravidya or an Aparavidya. Aparavidya is your Karma Kanda and the Devi Kanda, Devata Kanda. Whereas Paravidya is knowing about the Brahman. It is only our approach, how we look at the Vedas. So the perfect way of looking at the Vedas is to understand its meanings using the instrument called Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra that Veda Vyasa has given us, so that we can understand and interpret the Vedas properly. So Vedas fundamentally are Paravidyas. It is only our approach that makes it either Paravidya or Aparavidya. But we need to understand that fundamentally it talks only about the Brahman. So when again Yama says Sarve Vedaha Yatpadam Amananti, it means the whole body of the Vedas talk only about Brahman. And similarly, when Krishna says Vedashta Sarvair Ahameva Vedyo, that means again the entire body of Vedas talk about him only. And also the other way of looking at it is, I am the only person who knows all the meanings of the Vedas. Okay. So now let's keep going. So Vedas, there is another beautiful verse in Maha-Aitareya Upanishad, and again we have done this before. Tava yetaha sarva richaha sarve vedaha sarve goshaha ekaiha vyahritihi prana eva prana richa iti eva vidya. So that is a very important statement which actually expands this philosophy to the highest levels. It says it's not only the Vedas that talk about Brahman, but also every sound of the universe. Every sound of the universe celebrate its glory. So that is the highest levels of philosophy. Think about that. What does Maha-Aitareya Upanishad think this means when it says that all sounds of the universe? Yeah. So there are only some sounds that we are able to hear through our ears. Our ears has got a specific range in which it can hear and think about it. But there are frequencies that we cannot hear. Yeah. And those frequencies, those sounds also talk about the greatness of Brahman. Human beings have limitations, but there are higher beings which can hear frequencies in entirely different ranges. And they also know that those sounds also celebrate the greatness of Brahman. Okay. So this is an important statement that I've said. When you have such important verses from the Vedas themselves saying that the whole literature of Vedas, every word only talks about the celebrity of Brahman, I just can't understand how we can just narrow it down to just 5 sentences or 5 vakyas, as it's called in certain schools of philosophies, or Pancha Mahavakyas as it's called. How can only 5 vakyas be truth declaring? I find it extremely puzzling that it cannot be 5 verses when the Veda says the whole of the Vedas, and the Vedas are infinite, that talk about Brahman. Okay, so that is something that doesn't fit into my equation or the equations of what the Vedas themselves are declaring. We can have our own opinion and our own hypothesis, but Vedas are not saying that. Vedas are saying Sarve Vedaha Yat Padamamananti. So then, of course, you have the Vedas themselves. You have, as Pratibhaji mentioned, about Apaurushaya Veda. But then you also have Paurushaya Veda. So anything that tells you about Brahman actually is a Veda. Okay. Na indriyani na anumana vedahi eva yenam vedayanti tasmadahuhu vedaha. So anything that informs us about Brahman is actually Veda. You and I talking today is also Veda because we're talking about Brahman. Okay. So in Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya, Acharya gives a very good definition. Sadagamaika Vigneyam Samatita Ksharaksharam Narayanam Sadavande Nirdosha Asesha Sadgunam. So Sadagamas. And we have done this before, all the Agamas. So what are those Agamas? Brahmanda Purana gives us a definition. Rigadya Bharatam Chaiva Pancharatra Mata Akilam Mula Ramayanam Chaiva Puranam Chayetadatmakam Yeche Anuyayana Stesham Sarve Techa Sadagama. So anything that concurs with the Vedas, Puranas, Pancharatragamas, Ramayana, and Mahabharata, anything that concurs with it is a Sadagama. Anything that doesn't talk about Brahman is a Duragamas. So all the things that we have studied in our universities, I'm sorry to say, that does not talk about Brahman is not Sadagamas. Okay, so that is the key understanding that we get when Yama says Sarve Vedaha Yat Padamamanam. Okay, so in the first line itself, there is another important word that we need to understand. So when he says Sarve Vedaha, we understood what Veda is. Then he said Yat Padam Amananti. Padam means, what does that word Padam actually there mean? So you may remember we did Purusha Shukta about a couple of years ago now, and we did it in all its glory and various aspects. So there is this third verse, which is very, very important, isn't it? Pado asya vishwabhutani tripadasya amrutandivi. So pada, and the same padam is the pada. So when he says, Yama says, Sarve Vedaha Yat Padam, the Purusha Shukta says, Padosya Vishwabhutani Tripadasya Amrutandivi. So what does that mean? Asya Vishwabhutani Padaha. In the material creation, there is one pada of Brahman. Whereas in the transempirical plane, Tripadasya Amrutandivi, there are 3 padas of him in the transempirical plane. So what does that mean? Go back to those sessions. But essentially what I wanted to remind you here is, pada means an aspect. So there are various meanings for pada. Pada means aspect, pada means fraction, pada means one rupa, Pada, for example, we say Sri Pada, Uttama Swarupa, the great person. A great person is called Pada, Sri Pada. Yeah, Sri Pad. Yeah, it's commonly used term Sri Pad. So here, what does a Pada or Padam here means is aspect. Yeah, one aspect of Brahman is in the material creation, whereas three aspects of Brahman is in the trans-empirical creation. Trans-empirical plane is what the Purusha Shukta says, and that is exactly what Yama is saying. You know, these four padas are the various aspects of Brahman in the material world and in the spiritual world. You can know about those aspects only through the Vedas. Remember, here Nachiketa has asked, what is the niyamakatva of Brahman on souls in samsara? What is the niyamakatva of Brahman in moksha? What is the status of Brahman in moksha? And so on and so forth. So our friend, our Guru Yama is actually introducing that concept, saying the padam, the various aspects of Brahman can all be known only through the Vedas. So just as a quick revision, so what are the three padas of trans-empirical plane? So our Vedic scripture talks about three levels of trans-empirical plane, and it has given names to it: Anantasana, Vaikunta, and Shvetadipa. And it has said in these three trans-empirical planes of existence, there are three aspects or forms of Brahman: Narayana, Vaikunta, Padmanabha, Amruta, Kshema, Abhaya, and so on. So these are all the things that is there in our literature to help us do our manana and contemplation. So in Mandukya Upanishad, which we have again done in our sessions, it also talks about the same thing. Sarvam hi etad Brahma, ayam Atma Brahma, so ayam Atma Chatushpad. He has four aspects. Okay. So when you look at all this, the Samanvaya is very clear. What Yama is saying, what Purusha Shukta is saying, what Mandukya Upanishad is saying, they are all the same. That they're all talking about this aspect of Brahman. And our Yama says, if you want to know about any aspects of the Brahman, Vedas are your only tools, and all of the Vedas only celebrate aspects of Brahman. Okay, it is not talking about other things. It is all talking only about Brahman. Okay, then it says, okay, you study the Vedas. Then the next verse, Yama then very beautifully says, Tapamsi sarvani cha yad vadanti. Okay. So yes, sarve vedaha yat padamamananti. But remember, tapamsi sarvani cha yad vadanti. What does that mean? It is not only the Vedas that talk about Brahman, but actually, when you actually even think logically and when you actually think about our state of universe, it should lead eventually to this Brahman. Okay, so this is an interesting concept, because if you remember our Guru Yama in the previous verses, he said, Naisha Tarkena Matirapaneya. Okay, he said, God cannot be known through logic. Okay, but here he's saying, Tapamsi sarvani cha yadvadanti. So that means, what does tapa mean? Tapa means tapa alochane, which means deep thinking. Okay? Deep thinking and contemplation of what we have read in the scriptures. Yeah? Logical reasoning using the scriptures. Yeah? That is literally is tapa alochane. But also, even when you logically think about the status of the material universe, then you understand this great creator who is behind it. And that is what Acharya again said in Dwadasha Stotra, which we are all familiar with. Bahuchitra Jagat Bahuda Karanat Parashaktihi Ananta Gunaha Paramaha. Okay. So when you do the tapa alochane, the tapas there means not that we run into a forest and then do meditation under a tree. That might have worked thousands of years ago. But you and me sitting in a modern society, it doesn't make sense to do all this. That is not what this verse is talking. Upanishads and Vedas are relevant to all times. So when you take it from this time, you can sit in your room and still contemplate deeply. So that is also is tapa alochane. So when you do the tapa alochane, the logical reasoning using scriptures, And how do you do that? Go back to those slides where we talk about what is the epistemological algorithm, what is the Tatparya Lingas, what is Upajivya, Upajivika, Pramanya, Prabalya, and all those things. Read about it and try and revise and understand what is it that Yama is saying, because you need to have this in your mind when you understand, when you kind of think about what is it that Yama is telling us. Tapamsi sarvani cha yad vadanti. What does the deep thinking and logical reasoning using scriptures means? Upakrama, upasamhara, abhyasa, apurvata, phalam, artavado, upapatti cha langam tatpariyam nirnaye. So you use all these rules of interpretation of Vedic scriptures. Upakrama, upasamhara, abhyasa, apurvata, phalam, artavada, and upapatti. They're all there in Mimamsa Shastras to understand the meanings of these ancient Vedic verses. So when you do that, and when you cross-reference, like how we did in the previous verse, cross-reference the Gita, cross-reference the Purusha Sukta, cross-reference Mandukya and Mundaka Upanishads, then you get higher knowledge, you understand, your clarity of knowledge improves. And that is what Yama is saying. Tapamsi sarvani cha yadvadanti. So when you do the comparative analysis of various scriptures, you then come to the conclusion that even that Sarvani cha yad vadanti, they also talk about Brahman only. Okay, so the next verse immediately is interesting. So to do that comparative studies, to first to learn the Veda. So if you want to know about him, he has said you have to learn the Vedas. Then he has said he had to do deep contemplation of logical reasonings with scriptures. So you have to read the scriptures that he has made it very clear in the first two verses. So then the question arises, how do you go about and read the scriptures? There must be some method, procedures to read the scriptures. So that is what the third line is. So as you can see, this is a logical, each line is logically related to the next one. First one is about the Vedas. Second one is cross-referencing the Vedas and understanding this, understanding Brahman. The third line is, how do you read the Vedas? So Yama says, Yad icchanto brahmacharyam charanti. So I'm going to break for a minute and I'm going to get you to talk about what is brahmacharya. Are we brahmacharyas? We are all grihasthas, right? But are we brahmacharyas? If we take this, the spirit of what Yama is saying, or take it literally, it would mean that we should all be going back to brahmacharya. Yad icchanto. Icchanto means to know about that Brahman. With the desire to know about the Brahman, folks who are interested in Brahman do brahmacharya. Brahmacharyam sharanti. So I have underline brahmacharya, and I want you guys to have a view there about what brahmacharya is. We have done this before, but always revision is a good practice. So are we all brahmacharyas or not?
I think we are, because I don't know, I broke it down as like you are wanting to know about Brahma from an acharya. But okay, there is a celibacy concept as well involved in it. So you have to concentrate on the study material rather than other things.
Wonderful, Deval. Thank you very much. Pragnesh, welcome back. So you had something to contribute.
Thank you very much. Some more than others.
Yeah. So sorry, you want to expand on that?
I mean, we all are on the journey path towards understanding the Vedas, but some are ahead of others. Yeah, like so I am very at the back end.
Yeah, that's fine. But as long as we are in the same path, yes, of
we are on the same. We are on the same path and same journey.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So there are so many ways in which this word brahmacharya can be understood. So as Devalji said, brahmacharya could mean celibacy. Okay, celibacy means what? No distraction. So essentially, indriya nigraha. That Gita talks so much about indriya nigraha. Why? Because the more distraction you have in the material world, the less likely that you're going to be interested or even have the ability to focus on something that is outside the purview of the indriyas. Okay, so celibacy is an important aspect of brahmacharya. Okay, then study of the Vedas. So Brahmani Charanam. So we have said Brahma before. You will know that, you will remember, recall that Brahma means so many different things in various different contexts in the Vedas. So Brahma is something that is big, and Vedas are infinite, right? They are a huge volume of text. So Vedas are also called Brahma. So Brahmacharyam. So when you practice non-distraction, then your mind will be focused on the studying of the Vedas. So that studying of the Vedas is called Brahmacharya. Now, Brahman is Brahma Shabdashta Vishnaveva. So Brahman is equivalent to Vishnu. So when you do the Brahmacharya, what do you know? You know about Brahman. So that is also called Brahmacharya. So the question is, are we Brahmacharyas? If we are not distracted awfully lot with the material world, and we are able to find time, like how we are doing every Sunday, to focus on certain non-material aspects of existence, that is Brahmacharya. You don't have to become a bachelor. You can practice Brahmacharya by happily being a married person and running your samsara. So there is no problem with that at all when you look at this verse from that perspective. So Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti. If you think about our Chandogya Upanishad, chapter 6, yeah, when we did that few months ago, what did our friend Uddalaka say to Shvetiketu? Vasa Brahmacharyam. Yeah, go and do Brahmacharya. Go to Gurukula, read the Vedas, know about the Brahman, and come back after 12 years. Okay. So now you can see the logical sequence of, you can know about Brahman only by the infinite Vedas. And in the infinite Vedas, you have to do comparative analysis, internal evidence, and comparative studies of various portions of the Vedas and arrive at the truth. To know the Vedas, you have to follow Brahmacharyam. Now the next verse is very important, and this is the crux of this mantra, and that is what we are going to be doing for the rest of the class. So Yama then says, I will describe this Brahman that is described so well in the Vedas in just one word. Okay, Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi. So Sangrahena means in a very concise manner, in a very abbreviated manner. When in a very shortened form, I'm going to tell you what is that essence of the Vedas. That Tatte Padam. Yeah, that aspects of Brahman, the various aspects of Brahman that is so celebrated in the Vedas, Sangrahena Bravimi, in a very concise manner, I shall explain to you. And what is that? Immediately he will say, Om iti etat. So that person who is celebrated in the Vedas is called as Om iti etat. So this iti means that Brahman is called as Om. Etat is very important there. And I've told this several times before in this word, in many other occasions. Etat means that which is very close to you. Yeah, that which is very close to you is called etat. So here, remember, Yama is also a jiva like us. He is also a soul. He is an exalted soul, but he is also a soul. And in his deep meditation, he is teaching Nachiketa this. And he is a soul, and inside him is this Antaryaman, the Brahman who is inside Yama. Yeah. And he's saying that Yetat, that Antaryaman who is inside me, he goes with a very shortened name called Om. So Sarve Vedaha Yat Padamamananti Tapamsi Sarvani cha Yad Vadanti Tatte Padam Brahmacharyam Charanti. Sorry, Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Om Ityetat. Yeah, so this is a very logical but very beautiful mantra that actually summarizes the whole literature of Vedas and saying the whole literature of the Vedas is described by one word or one sound called Om. And this Om, also called Pranava, is a very, very important concept of Sanatana Dharma. And I am not tired describing about it. If you can recall, we did 3 or 4 months of Mandukya Upanishad. And then after that, we spent 3 or 4 sessions talking about Omkara Chintane. Then we spoke about Gayatri Mantra and so on. So it is so fundamental for Sanatana Dharma. So look at Chandogya Upanishad. That also says the same thing. Om it etadad aksharam udgitam upasita. Om iti udgayati tasya upavyakyanam. Chandogya Upanishad, the very first verse starts with Om. Mandukya Upanishad, the very first mantra, Om. Om ityetad aksharam idam sarvam tasya upavyakyanam bhuta bhavad bhavishyaditi sarvam omkara eva yachanyat trikalatitam tadapi omkara eva. Okay. Another verse, Mandukya Upanishad also reminds us, Omkaro vidito yena sa muner na itaro janaha sa muner itaro janaha. Last mantra of Mandukya Upanishad. It starts with Om and it ends with Om. He who knows the meaning and he who knows properly how to contemplate an Omkara is the real Muni. And nobody else is a Muni. He who knows about Omkara alone is a Muni. Omkaro vidito yena sa munir na itaro janaha. Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a separate Vidya itself, and you can spend hours talking about this Pranava Vidya. Om iti Brahma, Om iti idang sarvam, Om iti etad anukrutir, hasmava, and it goes on. It only talks about Om iti. Om iti samani gayanti, Om iti Brahma prasauti, Om iti brahmanaha. So it's a beautiful mantra, Pranava Vidya. So hopefully we'll do Taittiriya Upanishad at some point when we talk about this Om. But what I want to do is pull you back to this verse and say, look where our Yama is taking us. So you need to start somewhere, right? And he gives a very simple formula for us to understand who this Brahman who is celebrated in the Veda. Tatte pada sangrahena bravimi Om iti etat. Okay. So the next 20-25 minutes, let's see if we can tackle about this Om. What is this Om, or who is this Om? Okay. So this next slide, let us spend the next 2-3 minutes to try and recall. You know, we have done this Omkara on a number of occasions. So let's try and recall all the ideas that we know about Omkara Tattva. Okay. So I'm going to leave it open for a couple of minutes for us to have this conversation before I make progress in this slide. So who wants to take about their understanding of Omkara? What have we learned from Mandukya Upanishad? Who wants to go first? Okay, dead silence. So that probably means that you're all contemplating on Om. Sorry, who is that?
Madhu, in general, it's like the 3 words A, U, and Ma, and then 4 is the Nada. And then it can also be in the 8 form 8.
Okay, thank you.
And then all different aspects we learned, the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, that part, and also about sleep states, different states of sleep.
Fantastic, wonderful, Neetaji. So you got most of the ideas there. Deval?
It's the expansion before the creation. So Brahman says Om Kata. So, and then the vibrations will begin.
Yeah, fantastic. Paresh also has sent a message, beginning of the universe. Well done, Paresh. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, excellent. Any other ideas?
From the gross to the subtlest, where you can't even hear, no? That extreme peace, that Ati Shanta. I think from that we reach the Lord deep within, from out to inner journey.
Yeah, so that's again very well put, Pratibhaji. I think Neetaji also was picking up on those ideas of 8 different ways of looking at Om and how the Shanta, Ati Shanta is part of that. Yeah, so thank you very much. So yeah, so we picked up quite a few ideas, and thank you so much for sharing all your what we have all learned from Mandukya Upanishad. So here is a whistle stop tour for today's session, because when Yama has said Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Om Ityetat, at least we should spend 30 minutes to try and understand what is the gravity of why Yama has said that this Brahman should be meditated upon and should be known. And in a very briefly, if you want to know Nachiketa, so again, this one is interesting. This is also a test that Yama gives to Nachiketa. He says, he'll just say, I'll give it to you in a very brief format. Okay, Sangrahena Bravimi. What is that? He's called Om. Okay, if you are satisfied with that, Nachiketa could have said, yes, I'm satisfied with that, and he can go back to Buloka. No, but then Nachiketa asked for further expansion and discussion of this. Okay, this is also a kind of test that Yama gives to Nachiketa. So what does this Om then actually means? So I have put various ways, and I've actually taken some of the slides from the Mandukya Upanishad just so that we have a revision today about what is Omkara. So why is Omkara called Pranava? Okay, let's look at that. So everything is etymological, right, in Sanskrit. So Pranava. So it's got pra and nava. Pra means prakrishta. Prakrishta means sreshta, something which is very high. Nava. Nava has got 3 meanings in Sanskrit at least. Nava means new. Nava means number 9. Nava also means stotra or stuti. So Omkara is the most auspicious stuti or the worship of the Supreme. Okay, when you take the 3rd meaning and Prakrishta. So Prakrishta Nava means Prakrishta Stuti, or it is the most auspicious way in which you can remember and contemplate and meditate on Brahman. So Pra Sreshta. Another way of looking at it is Na means Balam. So Mahaitreya Upanishad said Nakaro Balam. Yeah, he who has strength is always happy. So it also gives you a sense of Ananda. Na also stands for Ananda. Va means Vam or Jnanam. So Sreshta Jnanananda. Who is the most highest Jnanananda Swarupa? It is the Supreme Brahman who is the highest Jnanananda Swarupa. So when we say Pranava, Omkara is called Pranava Mantra. This is what actually it means. It is an auspicious stuti that celebrates this Jnananandamaya Brahman. Why is Om called Bijakshara Mantra? So who wants to take that question? Why is Om called Bijakshara Mantra? Can you take us for that small little quiz? Okay. So
from that, from Om comes the Gayatri Mantra, and from Gayatri Mantra comes the Purusha Suktam, and then from Purusha Sukta all the Vedas come, and that's why A is for the first one. Agni Mele Purohitam, that's the first of the Rig Veda. So that way it continues. So that's the starting point.
Yeah. Beautiful, Neetaji and Sushruti. Yeah, perfect answer. So Om is called Bijakshara Mantra. Is what Bija means, what a seed, right? So what happens when you put a seed? A seed becomes a shoot becomes a plant becomes a shrub, and then it might actually become a huge tree. This huge tree is like the Vedas, and the same Vedas have actually come from the seed. Yeah. So essentially what it means is the whole Vedas are actually compressed in the Om, that Om sound actually compresses the whole of the Vedas. So that is one of the reasons why it is called Bijakshara Mantra. But also it is called Akshara. Akshara means what? Alphabet. So if you take Aksha, so A plus Ksha. So if you look at the whole of Sanskrit alphabets, it starts with A and it finishes with Ksha. So the whole of Vedic language, which is in ancient Sanskrit, starting with Akara and Shakara, is all compressed here. And when you read the whole Vedas, it gives you bliss. Ra stands for Ananda. Yeah. So that is also is a reason why it's called Bija Akshara Mantra. But as Neeta and Sushrut very nicely put, the whole of Vedas is compressed in this. So as Neetaji mentioned, Akara, Ukara, and Makara, we'll come to it in the subsequent slides. The whole of Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, and Sama Veda is compressed in Om. And as Devalji and Pareshji mentioned, that is the very first sound that came out during the creation. That is what started the creation. Yeah, it is. Remember, this is an important concept of Sanatana Dharma. The beginning of this creation, it is not the Big Bang that exploded. We did not have the Big Bang first. First, the sound came and it disturbed the primordial matter. And that vibration is what resulted in the Big Bang. And so before the Big Bang, what happened? Brahman says Om, and then Atataha, and then the material universe then gets agitated, the primordial matter, then the Big Bang, then the evolution of the subtle to the gross aspects of matter. Yeah, so that is also a profound meaning of Omkara. So thank you so much for those wonderful contributions. So let's keep going. So this is what Pratibhaji was mentioning about signs of Om. So Om can be just one sound, Om, or it can have two alphabets, O and M, or it can be three, Akara, Ukara, and Makara, or it can be four, as Neetaji mentioned, Akara, Ukara, Makara, and Nada. So when you put all three together, you get a sound Om. So that is the Nada. Or that Nada also, the way you recite, can have 6 components. So it can be Akara, Ukara, Makara, Nada, Bindu, and Kala. Or that Om can also be opened into 8 different components. Akara, Ukara, Makara, Nada, Bindu, Kala, Shanta, and Atishanta. So you can look at this Om in so many different aspects. So it is, people spend a whole lifetime learning about Om, and I don't think we can do that in 30 minutes, but it is just to give you a quick tour de force of what Omkara is. Go back to Mandukya Upanishad and Om sessions that we did. And also what we are planning to do is in about 2 to 3 weeks time, we are going to have a very, very talented, learned yoga teacher from Bangalore, India, who is going to talk to us as to how to do Pranava Upasana. So we will get an external speaker in about 2 to 3 weeks. We're still finalizing the nitty-gritties of it to tell us about how to do pranayama, for example, how to do pranava upasana and so on. So that will be an interesting session. Again, will be a revision for what we are doing today and what we have done in the past. So again, pulling you back, the science of Om is huge. It's a vast topic. So let us look at Om as an Akanda word. Okay, so there can be 2 dhatus from which Omkara can come. It's called Avadhatu or Uyi dhatu. So if you take Avadhatu, Avatiti Om, Avagatau Om, Avavyaptau iti Om, Avasamartye iti Om, Avagame iti Om, Avapraveshe iti Om, Avarakshe iti Om, Avavade iti Om. So I'm just going through this very quickly. What do these things mean? Omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, indweller, antariyamin, avapraveshe iti Om, protector, avarakshe, protector, avavade, sarva samharaka, destroys everything in the universe. So when you look at Om from Avadhatu, these are all the meanings that you get, and that is how you're supposed to contemplate on Om, rather than just say Om in a very dry, empirical usage of your vocal cords. We need to have all the underlying meanings when we recite Om, then we get the benefits of it. Look at Uyi dhatu. Uyate iti Om, Ota prota iti Om, Otat vachihi iti Omkaraha, in whom all the gunas are present. Yeah, so look at Omkara is talking about this Brahman as a Sarva Gunapurna. He is not a Nirguna Brahman. He is a person of infinite, inauspicious, non-material, trans-empirical attributes. That is why he is called Otatvachihi iti Omkaraha. Okay. Now, when you divide it into 3, Akara, Ukara, and Makara, and again, we've done it quite a lot. So, A stands for Allah, Illa, Anyata, Viruddha, Ananta, which essentially means Neti Neti. That letter sound A should remind you of this Brahman who is beyond matter. He is beyond matter. He is not any of the things that we know in the material world. Na iti, na iti. Na tatra chakshur gacchati, na vag gacchati, no manaha. No, na vidmaha, na vijanimo, yetad anushishyat. Yato vacho nivartante, aprapya manasa saha. These are all very famous verses of Upanishads that talk about the idea of neti neti. That is, this fellow is nothing that we know in the material world. He is completely non-material. Then you have Ukara, that stands for Uttama, Unnata, Utkarsha, or Utkata. So something who is the highest. Yeah. So I got two verses of Gita again for us to remember, 15:16 and 15:17. Pragnesh, do you want to take this up?
Yes, I would do 15:16 or both.
Do both, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Dvamivo purusho loke kshara shakshara evacha kshara sarvani bhutani kutastho kshara uchyate uttama purusastvanya paratmasmetu dayata yo lokatrayama vishya vibhartvarya ishvara.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pragnesh ji. So when you think about the letter U, Ukara in Om, immediately you should go to chapter 15 and understand how this Brahman is deliberated as such an exalted being. Ma, although this guy is nothing in the material world, we still can know something about him. So he is still knowable. Knowable through what? Sarve Vedaha Yatpadam Amananti, of the first line. Shastra Yonitvad, as Sutra, as Brahma Sutra said. So from the Vedas, we can still know him. So that is the idea of three letters, Akara, Ukara, Makara. It doesn't stop there. Akara means Atita, past. Ukara means Utpanna, present. Makara stands for Meya or Nirmeya, or the future. So this guy is always both in the past, present, and the future. He's always there, all pervasive, always controlling everything in all of time. Yeah, so that is another another view. Then Akara, Agamana. Ukara, Uttana, Makara, Manam, which means he is the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the universe, which is a fundamental definition that Veda Vyasa has given us. Janmadhyasya Yataha. So, Pragnesh, you have raised your hands, historical or anything you want to contribute at this point?
It was historical.
No, thank you. No worries. So when you look at Akara, Ukara, Makara in three aspects, we need to think about all these things. And again, Yama is saying, I'm going to tell it to you in a Sangrahena Bravimi Om Ityetat. But it's always a good practice for us. Why did Yama say only Omkara? Because he wants you to know that these are all the meanings. Yeah. Now, Neetaji also was mentioning about he who controls the four states of consciousness of the jivas. Neeta, do you want to come and explain this a bit more? Do you want to explain what are the four states of consciousness and how a Brahman is going to, how a Brahman contributes to that?
Okay, you're testing my memory. Okay, I'll try. One is Jagrati Sthana, Jagrati, then Sushupti, then Pradnya.
Swapna.
No?
Swapna is second.
Swapna, Pradnya. And then Turiya is the last one.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, go on.
First one is when we are awake, I think, the control.
That's in the right eye.
Yeah.
Vishwarupa.
Yeah.
The second one is in the thyroid. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And that is Pradnya, right?
Yeah.
Third one is
Swapna. Second is Swapna.
Sorry.
Swapna.
Then the third one is in the Hridaya Kamala.
Yeah.
That is the Shushupti state. And then Turiya is beyond all.
Above.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. So, yeah, that's exactly absolutely right. Spot on. Jagrati Sthana, Swapna Sthana, then Prajna state, Sushupti Sthana, and then Turiya, which is different from all the three. So this Turiya state is only in liberation. Yeah. But these are all the first three states. That is the waking state, sleep state, and the deep sleep state. And there are three forms of the Lord that controls the state of the jiva in these three states of consciousness in samsara. And in the fourth state in moksha also, there is the fourth form of the Lord that controls it. Is what? Varuna, is talking about. Yeah, let's not forget it is Mandukya is about Varuna, right? He is in deep contemplation. He's seeing all this. So again, Akara stands for Apti, contact with the external world. Ukara stands for Utkarsha, which means you go inwards. Makara means Mana, which is, you're blank. You're not in no contact with the external world at all. And the Nada, the fourth thing that comes when you say Om, that stands for the Turiya state. So again, when you look at Omkara Upasana as 4 components, you think about the 4 states of consciousness. And what are these? Jagrati Sthana is Vaishva form, as Shushrut mentioned, which is also called Aniruddha form of the Supreme. Swapna Sthana is Tejasa form, which is also called Pradyumna form of the Supreme. In Prajna state, Sushupti Sthanaha, he is called as Prajnaha, and that is a Sankarshana's name. That is the name of Narayana in that state. Turiya is the name of Turiya Namaka Paramatma in the Turiya state, and that is the Vasudeva. So the person who controls us in moksha, Sanatana Dharma, gives that Supreme Lord the name Vasudeva. Okay, so this Om is the Aksharam, is the Sarvaha, is Brahmaha, is Atma, who's got all these names. That is what we learned, the 4 forms of Brahman from Mandukya Upanishad. Now, the 4 forms also denotes Krishna, Rama, Narasimha, and Varaha. So these are all the 4 forms of the Lord that we actually worship in our current state. Yeah, we worship these things here: Krishna, Rama, Narasimha, and Varaha. So we worship this. So that is also denotes the 4 forms of the Lord. Now, when you look at the 8 forms in which Akara, Ukara, Makara, Nada, Bindu, Kala, Shanta, and Atishanta, when that opens up, then that tells you about these 8 names of the Supreme: Vishwa, Tejasa, Prajna, Turiya, Atma, Antaratma, Paramatma, Jnanatma. So that is the 8 component, 8 ways of contemplating Brahman using Om. And that 8 components of Brahman actually celebrates the 8-fold dispensations of the universe that Brahman does, which is defined as Janmadhyasya Yataha. What are those? Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara, Niyamana, Jnana, Ajnana, Bandha, and Moksha. Okay, so Jnana, Ajnana, Bandha, and Moksha is for the Jivas. Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara, Niyamana. Srishti, Sthiti, Samhara is for all the material components. Niyamakatva, Niyamana goes for both material and souls. And the souls have these material components as their coverings in samsara. So this covers the whole of existence, the 8 components. So this is the science of Om, and go back and look at those sessions and read your own books, do your Google searches about what that Omkara actually is and why our Yama said, Tatte padam sangrahena bravimi omiti yetat. So who is this Om of the Vedas? And we have done that verse before. The Om of the Vedas is our Vishnu. And why is that? Om equals Brahman equals Akshara equals Vishnu equals Narayana. Okay. As I said before, Om, Uyate iti Om. Brahman means Brihanto hi asmin, he who has pervaded in all time, space, and gunas. Vishnu also means Vishal Vyapto, he who has pervaded in all of time, space, and gunas. Look at the word Akshara. One of the etymology of Akshara is Akshnoti iti Aksharaha, he who is omnipresent, all pervading in time, space, and guna. So they all tell us the same thing. And again, we have some beautiful Gita verses, 7:8, 8:13, 17:23. So who is wanting to take these verses? 7:8. Who wants to do that? And Neetaji, do you want to go for 7:8? I'm going to ask Pragneshji to do 8:13, please. And 17:23, I will do the 17:23 unless somebody else wants to do it.
Okay. Rasohamapsu kaunteya prabhasmi shashi suryayoho pranavah sarva vedeshu shabdakhe paurusham drushu.
Beautiful. So look at that very, very clear 7:8. Pranavaha sarva vedeshu shabdaha. And that pranava, we've just understood. Pranava means omkara. Sarva Vedeshu Sabdaha. Among all the sounds of the Vedas, I am that pranava. And that is exactly what Yama has said. Initially, he says, Sarve Vedaha Yatpadam Amananti. And in the last line, he says, Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Omiti Etat. So they talk about the same thing. 8:13, Pragnesh ji.
Thank you. Omityekshaksharam Brahma Vyaharan Mamanusmaran Yah Prayati Jandeham Sayati Paramam Gatim.
Yeah, Om iti etad aksharam Brahma. So that is what we want to say. Om, that Om is Akshara Brahma. That Om is Aksharam, that Om is Brahma. That Om is also denote this Akshara Brahma. Okay, so there are so many ways in which 8:13 expands. And if anybody wants to go for 17:23 here, that again talks about Om. Okay, so just yeah, go for it.
Om Tat Saditi Nirdesho Brahmanastrividha Smritaha Brahmanastena Vedascha Yajnascha Vihitah Pura.
Very nicely put, Neetaji. Thank you. So look at that. Om Tat Sat Iti Nirdeshaha. I go with three primary names, Om, Tat, and Sat. So first thing that Krishna has said is, my name is Om. So what more evidence do we need? Yeah, when Krishna is saying, my name is Om, and Om's meaning is all this. Om denotes this Brahman. So the Omkara Tattva talks only about Brahman. So Om iti etad aksharam. Om iti Brahma. Om iti etad aksharam udgitam upasita. So this is this is all Upanishads. When they talk about Brahman, they will start off with Omkara. And that is why in Sanatana Dharma, we give so much importance to Omkara. Everything we start with Om and finish with Om. And everywhere we put Om because of the importance that Omkara is given in the Upanishads and Vedas. Yeah. So to summarize, this is a kind of summary slide. So this Omkara is he is called as Om. He is the supreme being. He has infinite auspicious attributes. He's got no defects. He is Jnananandamaya. He is omniscient. He is omnipotent. He creates, he maintains, he destroys the universe. He is in Pindanda and he is also in Brahmanda. He is omnipresent in everything at all times, in all places. You can know him through the Vedas and the related scriptures. So by understanding the Vedas, we get to know a concept of God. Yeah, so we may not be able to know him fully because we all have our limitations, but it will get you to have a grasp of what the concept of God is in Sanatana Dharma. Then you understand this is not a sectarian philosophy at all. This is a universal perennial philosophy of the Vedas. There is no sectarianism at all because it gives you a guide. It gives you a direction of understanding who this Brahman or the supreme being is. Look at this word Om. Om, the omni of English actually comes from Om. We have discussed this before. When I use the English word omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, which is used in very commonly in Western philosophies, that word, the first two words, omni, Om, comes from the Sanskrit Om. Yeah. So there are no surprises in the sense that everybody is talking about the same thing. And the Omkara is a non-sectarian approach to understanding who the supreme Brahman is actually. So this is a beautiful slide, I hope, because Neetaji actually mentioned that. So when our friend Yama said, our Guru Yama said, Sarve Vedaha Yatpadam Amananti, Tapamsi Sarvani cha Yadvadanti, Yad Icchanto Brahmacharyam Charanti, Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Omiti Etat. So he started off with Sarve Vedaha, all the Vedas, which is infinite. And then he finished his sentence saying that you can have all the idea of these words by this one sound, Om. So that is exactly what Neetaji was talking about. So Om, Akara, Ukara, Makara. That becomes Bhur, Bhuvas, Suvaha. then it becomes Tat Savituhu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yonaha Prachodayat of Gayatri. So the first portion of the Gayatri, Tat Savitur Varenyam, becomes the first Varga Purusha Shukta. Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi becomes the Purusha Shukta Varga 2, and Diyo Yonaha Prachodayat becomes the Varga 3. There are typos here, but this is Varga 3 of Purusha Shukta. The first Varga of Purusha Shukta is the description, is a concise description of the Rig Veda, and the second is Yajur Veda, and the third is Sama Veda. And then, of course, all sounds of the universe, as I said, talks about only Omkara. Okay, so that is how our Yamas approach this, which is beautiful when you look at this particular verse. When you go back and understand all the things that chapter 15 has said, Krishna has said, and all the things that Mandukya Upanishad has said, it completely, the Samanvaya is complete here. They all say the same thing. In fact, Acharya in Rig Bhashyam makes a very important says, Om Asesha Gunodara iti Narayano apyaso purno bhutivaro anantasuko yad vyahriti ritaha gunaistataha prasavita varaniyo gunonnatehe bharati jnana rupatvad bhargo dhyeyo akhilair janaihi prerako asesha buddhinam sa gayatri artha iritaha sapurnatvad puman nama paurushe shukta iritaha Sa eva akhila vedartaha sarva shastrartha evacha. So these are all the first few words of his Rig Bhashyam that actually summarizes and actually reminds us what is it that Yama is saying in this very first mantra that talks about the greatness of Brahman. And of course, I've told you about this Maha Aitareya Upanishad about Tava Eta Sarva Richaha Sarve Vedaha Sarve Goshaha Ekaiva Vyahrati Prana eva, prana richa eva iti, prana richa iti eva vidyat. Okay, so this is how much that Yama has actually started off in the very first verse of when Nachiketa said, I don't want to know about, I don't want material things. I am not disturbed. I don't want you to praise me. Just talk about this Brahman. And he starts off with the very first mantra of Sarve Vedaha Yat Padamamananti Tapamsi Sarvani Cha Yadvadanti Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Omityetat. So then what he will do in the next class for us is he is going to expand that. So we will deal with that in the next one. Immediately he says, Yetadeva aksharam brahma, yetadeva aksharam param, yetadeva aksharam nyatva, yo yadichasi tasya tat. And there's a beautiful sets of mantras that start off from here, talking only about the glories of the Supreme and talking about this Brahman, who is this chap? And there are many familiar words for us here, Aksharam, Brahma, Paramam, and all that. So we will have a very interactive session next week, which again takes this first verse and elaborates. So I want to put a reminder here. We are still in the tail end of the second Valli of the first Adhyaya. So from now on, what is going to happen is our Yama is only going to talk about the greatness of the Supreme for the rest of the Katha Upanishad, which makes it really interesting. And this gives a summary of what is the Sanatana Dharma's view of who this Brahman is or the Supreme Being is. And what we will understand at the end of it is an absolutely non-sectarian approach to the understanding of the Supreme Being who is the creator of this universe. Okay. So on that note, I'll close today's session and say Krishna Pranamatu. Any questions? We can take it up at this point.
Just no question, but just one point about there's a Gita chapter 8, 11 shloka, which says Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti. Vishanti Vitaraga Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Pravakshe. So it's a very similar one to Katha Upanishad that we all.
Yeah, wonderful, amazing connection there, Neetaji. So yes, you're absolutely right. There is a very similar verse in Gita also. So we will certainly start next session of actually getting you to recite that verse. And possibly if you could give us a 5 minutes description of what that verse Krishna has said in Bhagavad Gita and what Yama has said in Katha Upanishad, and they are all absolutely the same. Yeah, wonderful, Neetaji. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Any questions? Okay, so if there are no further questions, Harish, can you take us through Om, which is very relevant today, and then we close today's session.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. We'll carry on with Katha Upanishad next week, and I'll see you again next Sunday. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of the week. Bye now.
Thank you, Madhu.
Bye.
Thank you.